Star Wars Jedi Volume 1 The Dark Side. This is set 53 years before the Battle of Yavin, which would mean roughly 33 years before Revenge of the Sith. This means that this story takes place about 10 years before the birth of Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan Kenobi is around 6 years old at the time, being cared for by the Jedi Temple, if all that matches up. The timeline, as new stories keep being added, has to keep changing a little to make any possible sense, but I'm trying to follow along. Qui-Gon Jinn's second Padawan, Xanatos, is approaching the time where he would take the Jedi Knight trials. I first learned of the character of Xanatos in 1999, when the Jedi Apprentice series first came out. I was a huge fan of that series back then, collected all of the first 5 books that came out that year, and I think I ended up collecting all the books eventually. I'll have to dust off my Jedi Apprentice collection. My middle sister got me this book as a winter solstice present, at the same time that I gave my General Grievous comic from 2005 to my little brother. I recently borrowed that from him, and I'll be talking about that pretty soon. So, Xanatos was introduced as the former apprentice of Qui-Gon Jinn, who met a young teenage Obi-Wan Kenobi in the second book of the Jedi Apprentice series. And much of his backstory was set up in that book that this comic builds and expands on. We first see Xanatos and Qui-Gon's first apprentice, Femur, who I'm assuming at this point is a Jedi Knight. I was kind of hoping that Qui-Gon's first Padawan would have been a more interesting name than something that sounds like Legbone. I had this impression for a while that Quinlan Vos had been Qui-Gon's first apprentice. I'm not sure why. Was that ever an idea before Thulm was invented? I don't know. I also had this visualization of the 3 official apprentices of Qui-Gon Jinn having the 3 basic lightsaber colors. Green, when I thought it was Quinlan Vos. Red, Xanatos in The Dark Rival. And Obi-Wan Kenobi's blue. I just love colors and color-associated characters. Anyway, the tale follows Xanatos on what is to be his last mission as a Padawan to his homeworld of Telos, where an assassination has just occurred and the planet stands upon the precipice of civil war, a story that was vaguely set up in Jedi Apprentice The Dark Rival when that book was written just about 12 years before this was. On Telos, we get to see New Citadel Station, which very much resembles how it looks in Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, and either this is the station that was built after the original was ravaged in that game, in the Battle of the Jedi Exile against Darth Nihilus' The Ravager ship, and that's a cool boss ship fight. Anyway, or this is just the latest news station in a long line of them being rebuilt one after the other. The characters introduced, I like. Xanatos' family is fleshed out, and a little, and you get to see the civil war on Telos that was referenced in Jedi Apprentice. Now, upon seeing Xanatos again, and I'm going back to Jedi Apprentice here, his father Crion says to Qui-Gon, "Let me assess..." Oh, no, this is in this book. Sorry. I am going to keep going between the two. So in this book, Xanatos' father, Crion, says to Qui-Gon, "Let me assess 13 years' worth of Jedi training." Now, in Jedi Apprentice, The Dark Rival, it was established that Qui-Gon took Xanatos as a baby, which means Xanatos at the time of this comic can't be more than 14 or 15 years old. 16 maybe. Which is not the age most Jedi Padawans are near the end of their apprenticeship. They're more often in their early to mid-20s, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace, and Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars. Which would mean this doesn't quite match up with the story of Xanatos from the Jedi Apprentice series, but it's far from the worst offender in that sense. The character of Xanatos is mostly consistent with his appearance from that series. He is, he is boastful. He is ambitious. But he's also really trying to be a good Jedi. What you don't see is the subtlety and inner trickster behavior that he was said to always have, though that may have been difficult to write in this story, I'm not sure. He's very conflicted here and has to face that head on. And he does feel like he's about to be replaced as Qui-Gon's apprentice, which is actually justified here. Qui-Gon and Tal are bringing along this young Twi'lek girl named Oriekan, who seems like she's wanting to be taken on by Tal, though it does seem like Qui-Gon is considering her too, which is something Qui-Gon is also like towards Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace. In that movie, after encountering Anakin Skywalker, Qui-Gon really does come off as wanting and trying to dump Obi-Wan Kenobi for Anakin Skywalker as a new apprentice. And much as I like the 9-year-old Anakin, it does make Qui-Gon come off as always looking to trade up for a better apprentice. And he's especially like that and unlikable in this story. Now, Qui-Gon is depicted as this angry, overly critical, and yes, Anakin in Attack of the Clones accused Obi-Wan of being overly critical when he's not. But in this comic, Qui-Gon genuinely is. This is not someone that a young Obi-Wan Kenobi would be wanting for a master in 7 or so years. The way this story plays out is okay, but Qui-Gon needed to be the calm, collected sage that we see him as in actually The Phantom Menace. He just needed to be a little less trying to replace Obi-Wan in there. But Obi-Wan was actually near the end of his apprenticeship anyway, but still, I don't know. I also had a bit of a problem with how standoffish Obi-Wan was to Anakin, but, you know. I see the Qui-Gon from the Phantom Menace when he's being that calm sage, as who Qui-Gon has always been, after all those years of recovering from his building and rebuilding of trust and camaraderie with Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's really what the Jedi Apprentice series is good for showing. So yeah, I love Qui-Gon Jinn as a character in many other ways, but when he comes off as an apprentice swapper, and especially in this book, yeah, he needs to be written differently. Xanatos chronologically next appears in Jedi Apprentice Book 2, The Dark Rival, where he encounters a 13-year-old Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is mentioned in many of the other books around that time period, and last makes an actual apprentice in Jedi Apprentice Books 7 and 8. For a story that deals with a Padawan Xanatos, I was hoping for more than this. This is a confusing story because it looks like his father Crion and his sister Nason really are struggling to deal with insurgents on their world. We aren't given much information on the reason for the insurgency, and we get this constant hint that something's not right, but the clues aren't very well laid out for the readers. It's okay for them not to be laid out well for the characters, but it needs to be different for the readers, at least slightly different. It's also a real problem that this is only one volume. I'd have liked this story to stretch out over 3 or 4 volumes. In a way, this reminds me somewhat of the Revenge of the Sith novelization, where Anakin Skywalker's emotional conflict and the very complex decisions he's faced with, the warring allegiances in his mind, are shown much better than they were in the film. Even though this is nowhere near as good writing, but Xanatos is really trying to remain a Jedi throughout the mission. He's constantly turning down offers from his father to join him and become a planet. I think he was a governor, not. Well, that might be a ruler. It depends on how the hierarchy of government in the planet system is laid out. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's the ruler of the. I think he's the ruler of the planet, but only in a larger hierarchy. But anyway, but Xanatos is constantly turning him down, trying to remain focused on the mission, despite these conflicted feelings in his mind. But with Qui-Gon depicted as he is here, and how the events play out, I found myself only feeling sorry for him. So this Star Wars comic, I think you can skip. I'd have wanted more volumes of this story, and to have seen Xanatos' path down the dark side to have been shown more gradual. He never becomes a Sith. He's a Dark Jedi in the Jedi Apprentice series. There has never been any evidence that Xanatos ever encountered the Sith Lords of the time, which at this point would have been Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, as this is set about 20 years before The Phantom Menace.